Legends aren't just stories. Sometimes they're warnings. Tonight, we tread into the shadows of a tale that has haunted the outskirts of an unsuspecting village for centuries. I'm the Doctor, and I dare you to keep your light on as we uncover the chilling truth of the Lantern Man. In the heart of a forgotten forest, nestled beside a crumbling village, lies the Black Hollow Trail, a path cloaked in perpetual shadow. For generations, the villagers whispered of the Lantern Man, a spectral figure said to haunt the trail after dusk. Some claimed he was a lost soul seeking redemption. Others believed he was an ancient curse, punishing those who dared to trespass. The rules were simple. Never walk the trail alone, and if you see the light, turn back immediately. Marie Langley didn't believe in rules, especially not ones rooted in superstition. A skeptic and amateur filmmaker, she had spent years debunking ghost stories and urban legends. When her travels brought her to Black Hollow, she saw an opportunity. A chilling video about the infamous Lantern Man would make for perfect content. Despite the villagers' warnings, she dismissed their fear as small-town paranoia. Every legend has a rational explanation, she told herself. Armed with her camera, a flashlight, and a willful determination, Marie ventured into the forest just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The trail was unsettlingly quiet. The air was thick with moisture, and an earthy smell permeated the forest. The deeper Marie ventured, the darker it grew, as though the trees themselves conspired to block out the moonlight. Her flashlight cut a narrow beam through the oppressive darkness, but even that felt swallowed by the shadows. An hour in, her confidence began to waver. She had expected to feel fear, but not this suffocating sense of being watched. Every rustle of leaves or snapping twigs set her on edge. She stopped to take a deep breath, steadying herself as she adjusted her camera. It was then she saw it, a faint, golden glow flickering in the distance. Her heart leaped. It was exactly what she'd hoped for. The Lantern Man. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling despite herself. The light paused, then began to move toward her, swaying gently like a firefly. Through her camera's zoom lens, she saw the silhouette of a figure cloaked in shadow, holding an old, rusted lantern. Its glow was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, casting strange patterns on the forest floor. Marie raised her flashlight to illuminate the figure, but the beam flickered and died. She slapped it against her palm, cursing under her breath. When she looked back up, the lantern was closer. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cracking. The figure stopped, and for a moment all was still. Then, a low hum began to fill the air. It wasn't a voice, but a vibration, deep and resonant, that seemed to crawl under her skin. In her disoriented state, she stumbled into a clearing dominated by an ancient well. The stones were slick with moss, and the air was icy cold. The whispers began anew, emanating from the well, growing louder with every step she took. The Lantern Man stood on the opposite side, his glow illuminating the well's edges. Marie's camera, still recording, captured his form more clearly now. His hands were skeletal, his lantern rusted and dripping with something dark and viscous. "Why are you doing this?" Marie cried, her voice breaking. The whispers didn't answer, but the Lantern Man began to move closer. Marie's legs refused to obey her. She was rooted in place, her mind filled with fragmented images, faces she didn't recognize, places she'd never been. The whispers shifted, taking on a tone that sounded disturbingly like her own voice. "Join us. Help us." Marie's camera captured her final moments. She approached the well as though in a trance, her face pale and her eyes vacant. The Lantern Man stood behind her, his lantern swinging gently. The footage ended abruptly, but the villagers who found her camera a week later claimed they heard faint whispers when they played the recording. The well, once untouched, was now sealed with fresh stones, as though someone, or something, had been buried inside. Marie was never found. The villagers claim the Lantern Man doesn't just haunt the forest. He collects those who stray too far into the darkness, trapping them in his lantern's glow. On cold, moonless nights, hikers claim to see two figures now. The Lantern Man and a woman, her face shrouded in shadow, her voice humming a melody no one can forget. Marie turned to leave, but the trail behind her was gone. What had been a clear path was now an endless tangle of trees. The lantern's glow intensified, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to move on their own. The hum grew louder, forming words that resonated deep within her. Stay with me. Panic set in as Marie stumbled blindly through the forest, her camera swinging uselessly by her side. She tried to call for help, but her phone screen glitched, displaying incomprehensible symbols. A voice whispered through the speaker, "You can't leave now." She tripped over a root, falling hard onto the damp earth. When she looked up, the lantern was there, mere feet away. The figure holding it stepped into view, and Marie's breath caught in her throat. The Lantern Man had no face. Beneath the hood was a void, an emptiness that seemed to absorb the light. His lantern swayed, and the hum deepened into a mournful melody. Marie scrambled backward, her hands clawing at the earth, but her movements felt sluggish as though the air itself had thickened. She felt an unnatural compulsion to stand, to move closer to the light. The Silent Carnival. It began with whispers, as these stories often do. Every year, the town of Ravenswood held a modest, full carnival. It was a cherished tradition, complete with clowns, rickety rides, and fried foods that left grease stains on napkins and memories alike. But this year, something was different. The posters appeared overnight, crisp white flyers plastered on telephone poles and shop windows. In bold crimson letters, they read, "The Carnival of Whispers, one night only, midnight show." No one knew who organized it. The regular fall carnival had been cancelled that year due to budget cuts, yet this mysterious event promised something extraordinary. It boasted attractions no one in Ravenswood had ever heard of: the Hall of Echoes, the Spectre's Ferris wheel, and Madame Celine's silent tent. Curiosity outweighed common sense, as it often does. The was shrouded in fog, despite the clear October sky. Strings of dim golden bulbs lined the perimeter, casting faint halos into the mist. A crowd had gathered, murmuring in hushed tones, their breaths visible in the unnaturally cold air. The entrance was marked by a massive arched gate. On it, a single word was etched: "Enter." Kara, a local teenager, stood with her younger brother, Liam. She hadn't wanted to come, but Liam's pleading had worn her down. "It's just a carnival," she told herself, though the pit in her stomach said otherwise. They stepped inside, and the air shifted. Their first stop was the Hall of Echoes. It was a towering, tent-like structure, with walls that shimmered like liquid mercury. A man in a tattered coat and a blank white mask stood at the entrance. "Speak your truth," he whispered as they entered. Inside, the air was heavy, the silence oppressive. Kara and Liam walked cautiously through the maze-like hall. Their footsteps echoed, but the sound was distorted, as if the walls themselves were mocking them. Then came the voices. "Kara!" A low, familiar whisper called. She froze. It was her mother's voice, though her mother had passed away 3 years ago. "Kara, why didn't you save me?" Liam clutched her hand. "Do you hear that?" he whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Kara didn't answer. The voices grew louder, overlapping, each one dredging up painful memories and buried guilt. The exit loomed ahead, and they ran for it, bursting out into the cold night air. But the whispers lingered, faint and cruel. The Ferris wheel was massive, its spokes glowing faintly like the bones of a long-dead beast. The operator, an impossibly thin man with hollow eyes, greeted them with a slow nod. "No screaming," he said, his voice raspy. The ride began smoothly, the wheel creaking as it ascended. But as they reached the apex, the world below changed. The carnival grounds were gone, replaced by a vast black void. From the darkness, shapes began to emerge. Shadowy figures with hollow faces reached upward, their mouths stretched wide in silent screams. They clung to the wheel, clawing at the gondola as it swung violently. Kara clutched Liam, her heart pounding. "Don't look at them," she whispered. But Liam couldn't look away. One of the figures pressed its face against the glass, its empty eyes staring straight at him. "Help us," it mouthed. The ride jerked violently, and they were back on solid ground. But Liam was pale, trembling, and silent. He didn't speak again for the rest of the night. The final attraction was a tent draped in black velvet, with no sound escaping its entrance. A sign outside read, "Fortunes told, questions answered, truths revealed." Inside, the tent was dimly lit by a single flickering candle. At the center sat Madame Selene, a gaunt woman with piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through Kara. "You seek answers," Selene said, her voice barely audible. "Ask your question." Kara hesitated. Her mind swirled with questions, but one burned brighter than the rest. "Who runs this carnival?" she asked. Selene's lips curled into a grim smile. "You already know," she said. The candle flickered, and the tent went dark. When the light returned, Selene was gone, replaced by a mirror. Kara stared at her reflection, but it wasn't hers. The face in the mirror was gaunt and pale, her eyes hollow and black. Behind her, the shadows twisted into grinning faces. Kara and Liam fled the tent, desperate to escape, but the carnival was different now. The lights were dimmer, the fog thicker. The other guests were gone, and the attractions loomed like grotesque monuments. They found the exit gate, but it was blocked by the masked man from before. "You've seen the truth," he whispered. "You belong here now." The ground beneath them shifted, turning soft and cold. Kara looked down to see the black void swallowing her feet. Liam screamed, but his voice made no sound. The last thing Kara saw was the carnival collapsing into itself, the attractions twisting and contorting into unrecognizable shapes. And then there was silence. Weeks later, the town of Ravenswood was buzzing with rumors. No one had seen or heard from Kara or Liam since the night of the carnival. The flyers had disappeared, and the grounds where the carnival had stood were empty, as if it had never been there. But some nights, locals claimed to hear faint laughter and the distant creak of a Ferris wheel. A few brave souls who venture near the area report seeing a black velvet tent, its flaps swaying as if inviting them inside. None who enter are ever seen again. The Watcher. Eli Parker was a man of habit. Every evening after work, he would settle into his threadbare recliner, crack open a beer, and flip through the endless stream of channels on his ancient tube television. The world outside might have moved on to flat screens and streaming, but Eli clung to his old set like a lifeline. The TV, with its warm hum and faint static buzz, was more than just a device. It was a companion in his solitude. That night started like any other. The static flickered as he flipped through the channels. Each button press met with a burst of white noise. But then the screen froze. At first it was nothing but a faint, glowing line across the middle of the screen. Eli cursed under his breath, smacked the side of the TV, and prepared for another evening of frustration. Then the line expanded, flickering into an image that made his blood run cold. It was a room. Not just any room, his living room. The angle was odd, as if the camera were perched high in the corner, but the details were unmistakable. The faded wallpaper, the coffee table piled with empty cans, the old clock that hadn't worked in years. But the room wasn't empty. In the far corner, half shrouded in shadow, stood a figure. Its face was obscured, its body motionless, but its presence was unmistakably human. Eli froze, his breath hitching in his throat. Slowly, he turned his head to look at the corner in his living room. Nothing. When he looked back at the TV, the figure was gone. The screen now displayed Eli himself, seated in his recliner, staring at the TV with wide, terrified eyes. The TV blinked off, plunging the room into silence. Over the next few days, Eli's unease grew. The TV seemed to have a mind of its own, flickering on and off at random intervals. Each time, it displayed nothing but static, but the sound wasn't right. It wasn't just white noise, it was layered. Beneath the crackling hiss were faint voices, whispering in tones too low to comprehend. Eli pressed his ear closer, trying to make out the words, but they seemed to slip away, like shadows in the corner of his vision. He unplugged the TV, hoping to end the madness, but the whispers didn't stop. That night, he woke to find the TV on again, though the plug lay coiled on the floor. The screen displayed his living room once more. The camera angle had shifted, zooming in on his recliner. This time, there was no figure, but the whispers were louder, more insistent. Eli's sleep became fragmented, punctuated by dreams of shadowy figures and endless corridors. He stopped going to work, stopped answering his phone. His world shrank to the size of his living room, where the TV sat like a malevolent eye, always watching. One night, he woke to find himself standing in front of the TV, his hands pressed against the screen. He didn't remember getting up, didn't remember turning it on. The screen displayed a new angle, his bedroom. The figure was there, standing by his bed, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its shadow seemed to stretch toward him, even through the screen. Eli screamed, smashing the TV with his fists. The glass cracked but didn't shatter, and the image remained, distorted, but still visible. The figure turned its head slowly, as if hearing him for the first time. Desperate for answers, Eli began searching through his apartment, looking for anything that might explain the TV's haunting behavior. In a forgotten drawer, he found a dusty manual for the television, yellowed with age. Scrawled in the margins was a single sentence: "Do not watch at 3:33 a.m. Eli's blood ran cold. It was 3:25 a.m. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a sound like 1,000 voices speaking in unison. Eli dropped the manual and ran to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers turned into a low, droning hum that seemed to vibrate through his skull. The TV turned on by itself. The screen now showed the figure, closer than ever, its face a warped parody of Eli's own features. Its eyes were black voids, and its mouth moved in sync with the whispers, though no words came out. Then the static began to pulse, each wave matching the rhythm of Eli's racing heart. Eli collapsed to his knees, clutching his head as the whispers burrowed deeper into his mind. The figure stepped closer on the screen, its outstretched hand pressing against the glass from the inside. Eli could feel it now, the cold presence of something otherworldly, something that existed beyond the boundaries of his reality. The screen cracked, spiderweb fractures spreading outward as the figure leaned closer. Eli tried to scream, but his voice was swallowed by the static, now a deafening roar that filled the room. The screen shattered, and everything went black. When Eli's landlord entered the apartment days later, it was empty. The furniture was gone, the walls stripped bare. The only thing left was the TV, its screen intact and humming faintly with static. At 3:33 a.m., the TV flickered to life. The screen displayed a room eerily similar to the one Eli had disappeared from. A new figure sat in the recliner, staring at the screen with hollow, lifeless eyes. Sometimes it's not about who you invite into your life, but who refuses to leave. Some doors, once opened, can never be shut. Until next time, sleep tight.